The Highway of Tears refers to a remote, 724-kilometer stretch of Highway 16 in British Columbia, Canada, spanning from Prince George to Prince Rupert. Since 1969, this corridor has been the site of numerous unsolved disappearances and murders of women, many of whom were young and Indigenous. Officially, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police RCMP has acknowledged 18 cases, though Indigenous leaders and community members assert that the true number exceeds 40. The victims were often last seen hitchhiking along the highway, a necessity for many due to the lack of public transportation in rural communities. The commonality in these cases, their proximity to Highway 16, the victims' vulnerability, and the systemic neglect, eventually gave rise to a collective term for the tragedy, the Highway of Tears. The earliest known victim linked to this corridor was 26-year-old Gloria Moody. In October 1969, she was last seen leaving a bar in Williams Lake. Her body was discovered the next day on a cattle trail just outside of town. Her case remains unsolved. Over the next decades, a pattern emerged. Young women, especially Indigenous, would disappear while traveling between remote towns. Some were never found. Others were discovered murdered in isolated areas. The stories shared a haunting rhythm. Girls and women trying to visit friends, return home, or seek work, who instead vanished without a trace. One of the most pivotal cases in terms of evidence came in 1974 with the disappearance and murder of 16-year-old Colleen McMillan. She vanished while hitchhiking to a friend's house near 100 Mile House. Her body was found a month later. For decades, the case remained cold until advancements in DNA technology led to a breakthrough. A match was found linking her murder to Bobby Jack Fowler, an American drifter with a violent criminal past. Fowler had died in prison in 2006, but DNA recovered from McMillan's body confirmed his involvement, making him the only confirmed killer among the Highway of Tears cases as of the early 2010s. However, Fowler could not be connected to the other victims by DNA, and investigators have not conclusively linked him to further cases. Another heartbreaking case was that of 12-year-old Monica Jack, who disappeared in May 1978 while riding her bike near Merritt, just south of Highway 16. Her remains were not found until 1995. In 2014, after a lengthy undercover operation known as a Mr. Big Sting, police arrested Gary Taylor Handlin. He was recorded confessing to Monica's murder. Despite the controversial nature of the undercover technique, Handlin's confession held up in court, and in 2019, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Monica's case stands as one of the rare successes in the long list of tragedies along the highway. 16-year-old Ramona Wilson from the small town of Smithers went missing in June 1994 while hitchhiking to a friend's graduation dance. Her remains were found nearly a year later near the Smithers airport. Ramona's case remains unsolved, but her name has become one of the most publicly recognized among the victims, symbolizing the danger Indigenous girls face and the apparent indifference that surrounded their deaths for decades. Her mother and family have remained prominent advocates for justice and reform. Over the years, several suspects have come under scrutiny. Besides Fowler and Handlin, convicted killers such as Cody Legebokoff have been investigated. Legebokoff, a 21-year-old from Fort St. James, was arrested in 2010 after police found him trying to dispose of the body of 15-year-old Lauren Dawn Leslie, a legally blind Indigenous teenager. Legebokoff was later convicted of her murder and 3 other killings. Although Lauren's murder was not officially part of Project Ipana, the RCMP task force dedicated to investigating Highway of Tears cases, it bore enough similarities that many believe she should be included among the victims. Project Ipana was formed in 2005 to tackle the growing number of disappearances and murders along the highway. Named after the Inuit goddess Pana, who cares for souls in the afterlife, the task force initially focused on 9 victims. That number later expanded to 18, encompassing cases from 1969 to 2006. The RCMP's criteria for inclusion were strict. The victim must be female, involved in high-risk activity like hitchhiking or sex work, and connected geographically to Highway 16, Highway 97, or 5. Despite over a decade of work, budget cuts and public criticism have hampered progress. The families of the victims have expressed deep frustration with law enforcement, citing delays, lack of communication, and systemic racism that prevented the cases from receiving the urgency and attention they deserved. The victims involved: Gloria Moody, who disappeared after leaving a bar in Williams Lake. Her body was found the next day on a cattle trail, making her one of the first recognized victims of the Highway of Tears. Micheline Perry was murdered a year later near Hudson's Hope, but few details are available about her case. Pamela Darlington was last seen in Kamloops in 1973, and her body was found shortly afterward. She is one of the suspected victims of American drifter Bobby Jack Fowler, though no charges have ever been laid in her case. Around the same time, Gail Ways disappeared while hitchhiking from Clearwater. Her remains were found the following spring, and Fowler is also a suspect in her case. Colleen McMillan vanished in 1974 while walking to visit a friend near Laclahache. Her murder went unsolved for decades until DNA evidence linked Fowler to her death. That same year, 15-year-old Monica Ignas disappeared in Thornhill. Her body was discovered several months later, and she had been strangled. In 1978, 12-year-old Monica Jack went missing while riding her bike near Merritt. Her remains weren't found until 1995. Years later, an undercover operation led to the arrest and conviction of Gary Taylor Handelin for her murder. In 1981, Maureen Mosey was found beaten to death near Kamloops, another victim whose killer has not been found. Shelley Ann Basque disappeared in 1983 from Hinton, Alberta, and was last seen walking home. Alberta Williams vanished in 1989 near Prince Rupert. Her body was discovered several weeks later along the Skeena River. In 1990, Delphine Nicole was last seen hitchhiking from Smithers to Telkwa. She has never been found. Ramona Wilson disappeared in 1994 on her way to a friend's house in Smithers. Her body was found nearly a year later near the Smithers Airport. That same year, 15-year-old Roxanne Thiara was found dead near Burns Lake after being last seen hitchhiking. Just months later, another 15-year-old, Alicia Germain, was stabbed to death behind a high school in Prince George. In 1995, Lana Derrick was last seen at a gas station near Terrace. She was a college student and has never been found. In 2002, Nicole Hoare, a 25-year-old tree planter from Alberta, went missing while hitchhiking to Smithers. Her disappearance gained national media attention, but she has never been located. Tamara Chipman disappeared in 2005 while hitchhiking near Prince Rupert. Her case remains unsolved. The most recent victim officially connected to the Highway of Tears is 14-year-old Ayla Sarik Auger, who vanished in 2006 from Prince George. Her body was discovered days later in a ditch along the highway. Multiple systemic issues contributed to the tragedy. Many indigenous communities along Highway 16 lack public transportation, often forcing residents, especially women and youth, to hitchhike to get to school, work, or even medical appointments. For decades, local and federal governments failed to provide basic infrastructure that could have prevented many of the disappearances. Moreover, historical prejudice and racism against indigenous people, especially indigenous women, meant that some of the early cases were not seriously investigated until years later, if at all. In 2016, in response to growing public outcry and the demands of indigenous communities, the Canadian government launched the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The inquiry examined not only specific cases like those on the Highway of Tears, but also the broader historical and societal factors, colonialism, racism, misogyny, and systemic neglect that contributed to the crisis. The final report, released in 2019, labeled the situation a Canadian genocide and made over 200 calls to action, many of which remain unfulfilled. Media and independent filmmakers have also played a vital role in raising awareness. Documentaries like Highway of Tears 2015, directed by Matt Smiley, exposed the crisis to broader audiences and highlighted the emotional toll on victims' families. Investigative journalism and true crime podcasts have continued to explore these cases, keeping public attention focused despite the passage of time. Today, the Highway of Tears remains a solemn symbol of how society can fail its most vulnerable members. Though some killers have been caught and families have found slivers of justice, the majority of the women who vanished along Highway 16 have never been found. Their families continue to seek answers, and Indigenous activists work tirelessly to ensure the world does not forget them. Memorial signs now dot the road, warning women not to hitchhike, but they also serve as haunting reminders of a decades-long tragedy still without an ending.